Well, there's always budgetary considerations. And people are under the misconception that great architecture has to be expensive. It doesn't. Great architecture can be expensive, but
Hey everybody, it's Justin here from Spot Migration, back at you with another episode of Building Scale, specifically our Building Connection series, where we've partnered with Keymakers here in Arizona, where I'm currently located, a C suite networking group here in Phoenix, where I actually met Zac Cohen through them, which was a fun thing. And then he said, hey, by the way, you need to meet Lev. And then I was like, sure, let's do this. Let's have a conversation. So the guys at Libeskind Studio Design, Lev and Zac, Lev Libeskind, I got in a room with them. Well, I got in a Zoom room with them, or a digital room with them, to talk about architecture, not only the romantic, beautiful side of it that we do touch on, but also like, how do you blend the functionality with that beauty? And what are like the geographical context? I at one point asked, couldn't you just put great design, great architecture anywhere? And I got the response, well, you can't just drop the Eiffel Tower in LA and expect it to have the same oomph, which I was like, oh, well, yeah, that makes tons of sense. So when you think about the cultural things that are happening in a location, super important, as well as sustainability, energy efficiency. That's a huge thing that's on most architecture firms' minds, and how you can do that. Not just adding more dollars and saying breaking the bank. You can create great architecture, great design without doing that, which we talk about there, because budgetary constraints are a real thing. So that makes sense. It doesn't have to be expensive, though. Great architecture, innovating through materials and technologies helps, as well as representing a community, right? Like, this is a big piece. What we talk about, the mental health piece of architecture. What does this building do to your brain? Essentially, we talk about that, and it's just a really fun conversation. We joked about having another episode where we do a full 4 hours where we drink a couple bottles of wine and go from there. But that's to come. But I hope you really enjoy this episode. I know I did. It's a lot of fun, and it's always cool to meet people, not just in Phoenix, because Lev is in Italy. So connections happen in many ways, and I can certainly say now I have a friend in Italy. So buckle up, sit back, and enjoy our conversation. Yeah, we're big time, Zac and Lev. That's the way we do it. There's a countdown on this recording thing. We do it upright. We're not scared of the beautiful video production that we produce here. So I'm really excited. When I talked to you guys, I don't know, was that 2 weeks ago, something like that? All I know is Lev had to get a haircut. I knew that was a thing that we had to make sure we get. Oh, looking good.
I clearly did not get a haircut.
I'm going for that look. I'm just not quite there yet. My hair is actually longer than it looks in this video at this moment. But nonetheless, I had a great time talking to you guys, because I feel like architecture gets really romanticized at times, and there's a beauty to it, certainly. But you guys have a good balance of, like, there is actual reasoning why great architecture is great, the functionality of it, why it matters, and all this stuff. So I really want to take that, like, romanticized version of that and really break it down with you guys to showcase, like, how you can do really cool, badass shit, make it beautiful, and have a real impact on the places that those structures are going. So with that said, I'd love to get somewhat background of the firm, just so people have a little bit of context of the global powerhouse that is. So, Lev, you want to kind of do a quick history lesson for us real quick?
Well, I worked for many years with my father, Daniel, who's a world-class architect in his own right. And then I wanted to do something different, and I was lucky enough to meet Zac. And it was a crazy meeting, which I think Zac should tell the story, actually, because you tell it with a bit more flair than I do.
Well,
he is the flair man, that's for sure.
I don't know that that's the question that he was asking. I mean, so Lev worked alongside with Daniel for many years. He opened the office in Milan to facilitate a lot of the projects that Daniel's studio and Lev's studio did together, of which there are over 50. So many of those projects that are attributed to only Daniel are actually Daniel and Lev's collectively.
Correct.
Or even individually for Lev. But so that they were doing that for many years. In about 2017 or 2018, Lev and I met. We met through a mutual friend, which is the story Lev's talking about. I'm a developer. I worked on some very large projects in Asia and Europe, including the largest hotel in Eastern Europe, which is called Sunset Resort. It's located in Bulgaria. And we have a mutual friend who said, look, you're a big developer. You're an incredible architect. Let's get you guys together. On my end, I said, yeah, that's awesome. On Lev's end, he probably said, another developer. But he enticed us by saying that we were going to meet in Switzerland at this retreat. You can't see my air quotes, but I'm saying retreat in air quotes. And so I, at least, was under the impression that it was going to be a 5-star resort. And I think Lev was under a similar impression. But when we got there, much to my chagrin, it was a yurt with no running water and no electricity. So after Lev and I, we met, we yelled at Brian for a while. And then we...
Wait, it did have incredible views.
Oh, yeah.
The Matterhorn.
It's in this. It was absolutely beautiful views of the Matterhorn. The nature was fantastic. It just was not like what we expected. I had brought loafers. So,
It was a tent.
It was a tent, yeah. But Lev had a bottle of cognac in his bag, and we made a fire, and we drank the cognac, and we discussed how the Matterhorn reminded us of different elements of architecture. And we've talked about all kinds of different philosophies of architecture and got to know each other. And, and from that, a friendship was born, which later blossomed into a collective partnership. So in the end, it was completely worth it, and probably better than staying in a 5-star resort where we wouldn't have got to spend that kind of intimate time together.
Yeah, I think when you remove the fluff of all the fancy stuff, you get to the real heart of it. So Matterhorn is a good segue into how architecture and actual nature kind of go hand in hand. What are your guys' thoughts on one, how that's being done in across the country, across the globe, I guess, and then as well as how you view that when you're designing?
Well, look, it's a great question. It goes to really the root of architecture. And the history of it in terms of how it interacts with its setting. So every geographic context on the globe is different. And each one has had a historically different architectural solution or approach depending on its nature, its natural environment, and obviously the culture that emerged there. When you look at a bird, the first thing that comes to mind is not, how does it fly? How does it function? And in a way, architecture is also not, the first thing you think of should not be, how does this function? Where do the pipes go? Where does, that all of that is obviously very important, but there's got to be a first kind of a feeling of inspiration to it and a reaction to a certain kind of beauty. And that's how I would say architecture has to kind of mimic nature in a way that you want it to be as sublime as a landscape or an incredible sunset. I know you told me not to go too romantic into this, but
I love the romance. Don't get me wrong. I love the connection.
Nature is romantic.
That's all.
So you kind of have to, to be also more concrete. We're doing several projects now in parts of the world, for example, where you guys are in Arizona, where we are recalling in a very concrete and visible way the desert, the canyons, the buttes. So, and we always try to do that. We always try to somehow relate what we're doing to its context. Zach, I don't know if you want to jump in.
our philosophy is always to incorporate local elements into our building design. We don't, I always say it's sort of like a tagline, but we don't design buildings in a vacuum. They all have some kind of significance and ties to the surrounding people, environment, histories, culture, all of those things. So ours is well, ours, but our studios is a very emotional connection to human beings in general, which I think is very important. There are obviously very, very, very successful architects who can design a building and place it anywhere. It could be in New York, Chicago, or Dallas, or Munich, or wherever, and it makes it doesn't matter to them. But that's not the connection, and that's not part of the ethos that we that is really part of who we are and what we try to do.
Yeah, and just the last thing about that, that's really important because, I come from, my father's, school of architecture, which has a very famous and prominent and avant-garde formal vocabulary to it, the kind of acute edges and irregular windows and doors and so on. And, that is kind of from where I come from, and that's really how I think about the modern, let's say, destiny of form. However, having said that, we're always trying to push the envelope and do something in different vocabularies and different languages, because we want to show also, we want people to understand that when we're designing in Mexico City, for example, we have a project there right now, or when we're designing in Arizona, or we have a project here in Italy, we have an incredible private museum we're doing, that they're all unique to their places, and they all have to have kind of the language of the place rather than having something imposed on that place.
Yeah, I asked the silly question. Now I think it's silly. When I asked it, I thought it was a good question. Could you just take great architecture and drop it anywhere? Like, could you just take an amazing piece of architecture, pick one of your projects and drop it somewhere else? And yours was like, it's not how it works.
Can you put the Eiffel Tower in Los Angeles? I mean, I guess you could. I don't know.
You can put it in Vegas, kind of.
Well,
Vegas is a simulacrum. That's different. Vegas is not real. But I love Vegas, by the way. But I was
there yesterday. I just got back. I was there yesterday. So
right. Yeah. And he made it a little bit more unreal. But no, what I want to say is, look, I was at a big firm, I won't tell you who, several years ago, where they literally brought out a book of skyscraper designs.
I know who.
Renderings and everything, and just flip through it. And this is what we show the client. Which one do you like? Do you want the the convertible, the coupe, but that's kind of not the way that we design, because we always try to think of the end user. So we're always, talking to the neighborhood activists, talking to the city, going there ourselves. We always insist that we travel there in the beginning of a project, which is also something I learned from my dad. You go, you listen to the site, you see how people live there, because everywhere is different. So when you're in Shenzhen, China, or when you're in London, England, of course there are universal similarities of how people live and work, but there are those key differences that make every project something that fits. And if it doesn't fit, it will kind of never fit. And so I think really good architecture does that job of, first kind of imbibing into itself the sense of place. And then, when it locks in, right, when all the puzzle pieces go in, then it really works, in my opinion.
I mean, for the project that's coming up in Scottsdale, for instance, we did a very deep dive into the history of the Native American culture in the Valley. We pulled up different geometries that are used in the local Native American arts here in the Valley. Not Native American in general, but but specific to the valley. We pulled up their old irrigation systems to base the master plans design on it. Lev would have a better word, but yeah, I mean, we did a lot. We did a really, really deep dive into the symbolism, and basically the entire history in the valley. So I don't know, Lev, if you could speak, because you're the one who actually took those symbols and transformed them. So maybe you could speak more eloquently than I just tried to.
No, I think that's exactly right. Like, I don't have much to add. I mean, we did a deep dive research into the various tribes in the area, some of which, like the Hohokam people, go back to the time of Jesus Christ. So I'm talking about 2 millennia ago. And even then, 2,000 years ago, in such an isolated part of the world, you can still, based on the archaeological record, they have public space. They have public buildings on the public space, and then around them, the habitations. So it's very similar in some ways to an Italian piazza. It goes to that sense that the opposite of what I was saying before, in fact, a kind of universal sense of the importance of public space and urban matrix to how people live and how people work and interact with each other. So we use that along, as Zac said, with some kind of Native American patterns that come, again, from Arizona and from the Valley to give it a sense of history, which is something that's really never been done in Scottsdale before. For whatever reason, it's just, they're just building and building without taking into consideration what I think is a really treasure trove of architectural history.
And we involved the descendants of those tribes today. We had deep, in-depth meetings and continue to have meetings with the Yaqui tribes.
That's right, yeah.
To work with them and not present something that's kitschy or not kitschy or derivative, but something that's a real incorporation and reflection of the importance that those tribes had on Arizona today. So, I mean, that's just one example. I'm just saying it because I'm here in Arizona, and that's something that we're working on currently. But we do that kind of deep dive, whether it's in, we're working on something in Mumbai or we're working on something in Mexico City. Those are the types of elements that we incorporate into our architecture.
When we were talking before and how you were explaining it, it was very much like chefs in different parts of the world. You can get a great taco in New York, but man, if you go to the right spot in Mexico, it changed your life, right? Like it's different. There's a difference to it, which, again, back to this romantic component. Let's talk about the other side, the functional side, or the side that, as you're building a business and as you're building a building, to obviously there's an exchange of dollars that occur. How do you blend those? Like, you could keep going with great design and bigger and better and all this stuff, but like at a certain point, where is the choke point of saying, like, we could do that? However, that probably is not going to make sense for the person that owns this piece of property.
Well, there's always budgetary considerations. And people are under the misconception that great architecture has to be expensive. It doesn't. Great architecture can be expensive, but it need not be. And so that's another point of differentiation that I'd like to mention between our firm and other firms. Now, some of the things that we've designed or continue to design are expensive for a reason, right? We have a project that we're just now starting, coming up in the Middle East, which will be very, very expensive. But that's by design. We have projects here in the U.S. as well as in Europe. I mean, we have a project again in Phoenix that's stick frame, right? It's a wood frame building. It's no more expensive to build than any other project in Arizona. This is a Rainbow Road project. It's based on Mario Kart, and so it's a really interesting design. Again, it's not derivative of the video game. In fact, if you just look at it, you wouldn't recall the video game, but once you know that it's based on the video game, then you kind of get it. But it need not be expensive. There are, structural components that can be streamlined in order to make it buildable. And quite frankly, we think budgetary restrictions we see them as a challenge, and we see it as a way to get creative on how to deliver something beautiful that is also profitable for the investor or developer. Lev?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're paying a bit of short shrift to yourself, Zac, and to our whole studio, which you only opened very recently in Phoenix.
Yeah.
But having a group of incredible professionals that, again, took these two wood frame buildings we're doing as a real challenge, allowed us to do things that in the beginning the client and even engineers thought were impossible for that budget. Yep. And it took a lot of work and a lot of ingenuity and creativity and a lot of meetings. And, it wasn't, put it this way, it wasn't easy. And I don't want to make it seem like it's easy to have buildings of that complexity with that kind of budget. But I think it's a testament not just to Zac and our great studio, but it's a testament to the modern world that technology and materials and, all these new patented materials that are coming out all the time, every month, that you're able to bring these kind of architectural dreams into reality. And it wasn't like that until recently, I can tell you. I mean, I remember even, when my father's studio was working in Germany in the 1990s, it was just a completely different world. And there were many things that we take for granted in today's architectural scene that were just not doable, not physically possible back then. So I think that we're really in a kind of a renaissance moment of architecture, thanks to technology, sustainable technology, and also new experiments and materials. And yeah, it's a great time to be working.
And I mean, as someone who is and has been a developer for coming up on 30 years now. I hate to date myself, but what are you going to do? I mean, we not only see savings and benefits to investors and developers in the near term based on construction cost per square meter or per square foot, but also long-term savings with, different types of energy saving materials that are or materials that weather better, that don't have to be replaced or repaired as often. I mean, so we see long-term savings with energy and things like that other, short-term people wouldn't necessarily see. So we have near-term savings and long-term savings. And I hope that I'm able to help Lev and the rest of the studio see some of these in advance, that we can pass those different technologies and ideas on to other developers.
Yeah, that when you're trying to have a reflection of a certain area, a certain culture that exists in that area, how do you then blend that into the design of like, hey, like we want this to be a LEED building, or we want this to be more energy efficient, or we want these bigger asks that are coming, if it's regulatory and or just the person that owns the property that wants to have these certain certs, or just wants a building to have more sunlight through it for the occupants that are in it. Like, how do you blend those concepts of like, hey, we need to hit this metric, but then also we don't want to take away from the culture that we're trying to recreate in this building?
If there are certifications that the developer wants, like LEED, if there are credits or something he can get, that's at the discretion of the developer. Having said that, all of our buildings are energy efficient. Whether they want that LEED designation or not is whether they want to spend the money to get the designation.
Got it.
But all of our buildings are energy efficient. All of our architects are LEED certified, and most of our buildings are LEED Gold or higher.
I mean, It's also, I think, to get to what you're saying, it's a real balancing act in terms of you kind of have four I see it as four directions, right? So to the north, you have the clients and the budget, right? And respecting the business plan and making sure the building pencils. And the investors and, the developers we work with, some can be very complex, different stakeholders. Then you have the architecture itself, which you compromise, but only to a limit, right? Because after all, that's who we are. That's our identity. That is our expression. So it has to be a part of that balance. Then you have the questions of sustainability, which are really important and getting even more important all across the world. So questions of, as Zac said, of materials, of certifications, of how the building heats and cools, of how the facade interacts with sunlight and the elements. And the fourth one, I'd really say, is the public, which is not just the city. Obviously, the city and the politics of a building, especially the more expensive it gets, the more political it is. But also just the neighborhood stakeholders, because, some of these activists can be very powerful, which is correct. They should be. They're speaking for the neighborhood, and they usually have businesses in the neighborhood. And, you have to listen to them if you want to get your building built. And so I think there's a kind of a general balance between those four elements that you have to be able to navigate as an architect.
I agree.
When we talked last time, you mentioned I think it was a flooring material, and that maybe it was a tile, which
Yes.
Could be the case. Let's talk about that thing. We talk about sustainability, and we talk about having buildings do more for you. Let's talk about that.
Well, this is many years ago, but I developed a tile with an Italian company called Casa Grande Padana, which is from Emilia-Romagna in the center of Italy. And they're in a place called Sassuolo, and they're just a great company. They just do amazing products. And they had patented a tile that they first used together with us, with my office in Milan, on a series of projects, one in Berlin, one at the Milan Expo, one at their headquarters. We did a huge public artwork, which really dominates the whole panorama of that town, Sassuolo. And what's amazing about this is that this ceramic tile is it's coated with a substance, a chemical, that when sunlight hits it, it creates a chemical reaction that releases oxygen. And I don't exactly remember how much, but it was like 4 football fields for each facade. It was like mind-blowing. And it immediately was very persuasive to the cities we were working in, to the city councils, and right away gave us LEED certification because it was so environmentally not just sustainable, but promoting healthy city. So, that's one example which as I told you last time, I love to tout because it really opened my eyes as to the possibilities of because, by the way, the ceramic itself, and you can go and see it in a project called Sapphire in Berlin that I executed. I did the tiles for the facade together with my father. This is, again, about 10 years ago. But it opened my eyes to the possibilities of having something really beautiful, which is also really forward-looking in terms of how it interacts with the environment. And I have to give it to my dad that he was so open-minded and so excited about this new type of experimental technology that, again, it opened the door for me to continue to look and research into the future of technologies and materials. And I think that's one of the best things about being an architect is that you get to go to factories, you get to look at what's the latest stuff on the market and incorporate it into your work. I don't know, Zac, if you want to.
No, I mean, there's an ancillary benefit to the residents, which they're living in a heightened oxygenated environment, which is obviously good for so many different reasons. So, you're living in the center of Berlin. There's a lot of traffic and fumes, and the air quality is, maybe not ideal. But, if you're in your unit, you're in a heightened oxygen environment and you're feeling good.
That's one, amazing. I need these tiles for my house. But that's first. Secondly, let's talk about how it interacts with the people, obviously, within the building and then outside of the building. So you put a structure in, you put this big, badass, cool-looking building here, right? What's the vision and the goal for that community when you're having this concept of, like, we're going to put in this hotel, we're going to put in this museum, we're going to put in this whatever it is? What's going through your brain as you're designing this to say, like, how can this impact the greater, right?
Me or Lev?
Anybody can chime in at this time, gentlemen.
Look, I think that, obviously we need to respect what the developer needs, but when we go into a design, I think that the needs of the communities, those who live, work, or drive by and interact with whatever it's going to be, whether it's a master plan or an office building or a residential space, it needs to promote a sense of something bigger than the self. I always use Rome as an example. Like when you're walking around Rome and you look at these, incredible buildings, you have a sense of well-being. You have a sense of being connected to something greater than the individual, greater than yourself. And I think that for me, that's the point of architecture. They say architecture is the mother of all arts. In some ways, it's better than the other arts, in my opinion. That's an opinion, right? It is so interactive, and it's something in which people will spend most of their lives. And I think it's really, really important to consider the impact on the individual of a community when you're designing something that they will have to look at potentially forever.
Yeah, I agree. When you look at, postcards don't exist anymore, but when you look at kind of people's images of culture or of identity, right, like of national identity, it's always architecture. Occasionally it might be a painting, or sculpture, but usually it's a building, because architecture really represents the community and therefore a group, a collective identity, which is also, however, personal, because your experience with space is always personal, right? There's no collective experience. It's always a direct human experience with space. So in a weird way, architecture connects the personal and the collective or political through the city itself. Like the city itself is probably the greatest human creation, the greatest human artwork. And so, without getting too philosophical, I think that just architecture cannot be underestimated. And it's not just about putting up, nice looking buildings, but doing something that really kind of breathes that place's air and spirit, and something that people, like Zac said, gives them a sense of well-being.
And I think it's important for both developers and architects to challenge themselves to make communities better. They have this power to affect people's lives, and oftentimes the bottom line gets in the way, and they create things that are functional but not inspirational. And I understand there's a cost consideration to some of that, but some of it can be mitigated. Like, it doesn't, as I said before, it doesn't have to be more expensive. It has to be more creative. So if there was one message I was trying to get across today, I think that would be it, that we owe it to our communities to design better spaces for people to live their lives in, whether that's working life.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that a lot of people react badly to the modern world because of what Zac is saying, because architecture is not perceived it's not as beautiful as it used to be. And so there's a sense of like, oh, why can't my town look as beautiful as Florence or Rome? Why do I have to live with a bunch of anonymous boxes made out of concrete and glass. And in a way, the one of the best things that could happen is to have more investment, both fiscal investment, financial investment, but also kind of spiritual and political investment in beauty, in a beauty of a place, because it really makes it changes people's disposition.
I think when I think of that, what you just said, obviously a downtown space can have these just, here we go, here's a box, there's a box everywhere, a box. But communities, similarly, you find, 700 person, master plan community that you've got, 4 different houses, 6 different houses, whatever it is, and they're just stacked across the board on top of each other. And they bring, people need a place to live, and there's obviously you got to have a balance of not everybody can have this amazing custom built house. That's apparent. But is that detracting us from some of maybe architecture that we maybe should be focusing on, because it's actually good for our health? It's good to be in good architecture.
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's a difference between building and architecture. Mm-hmm. Building is just, it doesn't necessarily need imagination or whimsy or, symbolism. But it has to be a good balance. I'm not saying that every building has to be a work of art, but there has to be some intelligent master planning that goes well with the way that people live and the way they want to live, and a sense of beauty and wonder in your everyday. Because why wake up in the morning? Sorry, go ahead.
I think that the decline in mental health, although mostly because of this, is exacerbated by the fact that people live in these, anonymous boxes, and they go from an anonymous box to an anonymous box and back to an anonymous box, and there's no engagement in the senses. There's no sense of place. There's no sense of something higher than themselves, and it tends to contribute to poor mental health. I have the unique experience of having lived in Eastern Europe. You wanted to talk about master plan communities. Some of them are done well to foster engagement with your neighbors, but most aren't. So I lived in Eastern Europe, and when I first started traveling, and this exists in Asia too, but they have these old communist, gray, tall housing blocks all over Eastern Europe. And, you get there, and I used to think, well, how could they do this? Didn't they know what they were doing? How could they create such eyesores that are never going to be remedied? These will be here forever, and they're always going to look horrible. And then I go to parts of the United States where these master plan communities are being built, and all the houses are the same, or there's 4 models like you mentioned before. And I say, well, you know what? We're doing it right now, except for the ones that we're doing now, master plan communities, single family homes have a terrible impact on the environment. At least the communist blocks had a small footprint, so they were at least somewhat environmentally sustainable. But in fairness, what we're doing now, in my opinion, is a little bit worse than what they've done. But no, I used to ask myself, how could this happen? And then I say, wow, we're doing it as we speak right now.
So how do we remedy that, Zach? Wave the magic wand? How do we get out of that mindset?
I think people have to demand more. It's like anything else. They should demand more of all arts. They should demand more of music. They should demand more of architecture. They should demand more of sculpture. They should demand more of themselves. That's all the way philosophical, but you asked my opinion. I'm sure Lev can give something that ties the whole conversation together, but...
No, I agree. I'm often surprised about how passionately people view cinema, which is something, you watch a movie for 2 hours and then that's it, right? Or maybe you watch it again in a few months' time. But architecture, people tend not to have strong opinions on it, even though they live in it and work in it every day, all day, basically. So there's this kind of idea that architecture is like almost like the unconscious, like a kind of unconscious background that you just take for granted. But, you know, as Freud would say, you have to start getting conscious about the unconscious and start thinking about really, you know, where is it you live? Where is it you work? Where is it you play? And how, you know, how can cities become better and become more human, to be honest, especially now that cities are, you know, 10, 15, 20 million people, even more. So you've got these megalopolises that really need to be very carefully managed on a human level in order not to become total dystopias.
I mean, and I'm paraphrasing, but Winston Churchill said once that human beings shape architecture, and then architecture shapes us.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely true. We talk about the master plan. Nobody wants to talk to their neighbor, which I'm originally from Chicago, so like I knew everybody on my block. We did poker games all the time. We did all this. So like now you drop me into Arizona, and I'm like, oh no, I got to meet everybody. Like I'm gonna knocking on doors, get out baskets of fruit, whatever I got to do to like create community. Literally on this past Saturday, we hosted a second Saturday, which 4 of our neighbors were over with a bunch of our friends, some family. Like it's just like I'm gonna force community upon this community. There's no way. But to your point, it's like you have to be conscientious about it. You have to try. You have to actually look around and see what's happening and, you know, take action. Like you have to do something about it. So
no, I mean, I think architecture is one of the reasons for this and how master plan communities are designed. I mean, one of the most effective ways of fostering interaction in human history is the Italian piazza, which forces interaction with your neighbors. You know, you funnel into a central square, which is a meeting place, and that's where you do your shopping and your gossiping and your drinking and your eating, and it forces people to interact with those around them. We no longer design like that. We design in grids. We design from you to go out of your garage in your car. You might wave at your neighbor, you might not, and that's the last time you're going to see them that week. I mean, that is architecture. That is what architecture does. I mean, it's master planning, which a lot of people forget is architecture, but those are by design, and you can design them in a different way.
Yeah, that's super important. That everything we just take for granted is like, oh, that's just the way the world is. It's by design, as Zac said, and you can always change it. So, you know, you always should be ambitious, I think, in your goals and your dreams for what cities can be and what architecture can be, because it's all by design. If the world decides to do something, they will do it, as you see with many examples from, you know, fracking to sustainable cities and cleaning up rivers or whatever it is. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I think that goes for architecture too.
I mean, and you can see it like at Apple at HQ, right? When Steve Jobs worked with Norman Foster's office, right? To create, it was Foster, right? That's correct, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they work to facilitate interaction between groups, and it's not forced interaction per se, but it's a way for people to be around those with whom they work rather than in small cubicles and boxes.
Encouraged interaction. Maybe
encouraged interaction. Thank you.
No, but that's really important. That, like, you know, what Foster did in Cupertino, or you know, a lot of the huge changes in the way people work today. That came, I think, from a brilliant kind of melding between tech companies and the way tech people naturally think and work, and really smart architecture that facilitated, sorry about that.
All good. You're a busy man, I know.
A kind of a new way of working beyond the cubicle, which was always, you know, I love that movie Office Space, right? Which is like the ultimate indictment of that kind of 1990s cubicle reality. But today, I mean, if you go and see the Google campus, which I saw, or Cupertino, or wherever it is, it's a completely more human and better way of working. And I think that, that's also architecture, right? It's not just the big picture master planning or pretty facades, but it's really about layouts, intelligent work environments, intelligent residences, etc.
Yeah, we're currently redesigning a whole bunch of functionally obsolescent office spaces right now. So I don't know who brought this up. I think it was you, Justin. But yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. So thanks for bringing it up.
No, very intriguing. Post COVID, again, I come from Chicago. A lot of buildings in the downtown Chicago that not as many people want to go to it, right? Like that's just essentially what has occurred. So now, like them, it's like, well, what the hell do we do with the space? Like, how do we redesign this? How do we change this to make this functional to what the new culture is, right? Like it's, and every city's different, some more or less, all those different things. So very intriguing for what you can speak on for the projects that are happening here in Phoenix. Like what's the overall goal, right? Obviously we talk about, you got to make sure you take care of the developer and what they want, but like when you think about those communities, what's the goal?
Well, we have even the small one, even Rainbow Road has quite a significant public art portion to it, which the city of Phoenix requires on some level, but we've gone, even further to ensure that there's community engagement, that it's going to be something that people want to live in, that they're proud to live in. I think people have lost pride in where they live. They live in, I'm in Phoenix, I'm looking out the window and, there's some new buildings here that aren't inspirational. And so we're trying to be the counterforce of that. We're trying to design places that people say, oh yeah, I live in that Mario Kart building. That's where I live, or I live. Well, I almost gave away where the other project is, but I live there, and I'm under NDA, so. But yeah, I mean, we want people to have a sense of pride in where they live, and to be a part of something bigger, and to have a camaraderie with those who are their neighbors, so that like your monthly block party, they know their neighbors, and if you know your neighbors, I think you treat your neighbors better, and if you treat your neighbors better, you live in more of a society that I want to live in.
Correct. We have two buildings in the Roosevelt's Art District, right? Rainbow Road and Manzana.
Right.
And one of them is about 38 apartments. The other one is, what is it, Zach, 65, around there?
No, it's 98.
Oh, it's 98 now. Yeah, sorry, it got bigger. Okay, it's 98. But, we met with some of the people, some of the kind of community stakeholders, let's call them,
yep,
and activists. And they were so excited by these buildings because, it's an arts district. And really, that means galleries and murals. But there's a real dearth of architecture.
Yep.
And so when they saw these projects, said, oh, wow, this is what should be here. This is exactly what we want, because it gives expression to this idea of this arts district and this neighborhood. So, and we were very happy to kind of be part of that, because that's exactly what we're working for. Is it like Zach said, that kind of community.
Yeah, we're very appreciative that the city council here in Phoenix and Vice Mayor Ansari, who is our councilwoman, was so in favor of the projects that we're doing and just so supportive. I mean, she came to the groundbreaking ceremony, and I mean, she just had wonderful things to say, and she's just so supportive of doing something different and really creating public art out of livable space. And I think that's really important, but not just in an arts district. I think that's important, full stop, for art.
I have a saying that I stole from Chris Gardner, who is the Pursuit of Happiness. That's his book. and then Will Smith portrayed him in the movie. If you're going to do something, do it world class. And I certainly feel like that's what you guys do. So
Totally.
I appreciate it. I live in Arizona, Phoenix Metro, so like I certainly can see it firsthand. But if others wanted to come see amazing architecture, where would you suggest them go, guys?
What
You mean in general?
You mean cities?
In general, if a listener said, you know what, I also want to get down on this architecture journey that these guys are talking about and the beauty that it has.
You mean, do you
where's
mean
a good
modern?
spot to like say, wow, that's just very awing of what's being built currently.
You mean modern architecture, contemporary?
Yep. Yeah, correct.
New York.
Yeah.
I think Miami is good too.
Vancouver.
London, I think, has a lot. I mean, obviously, Asia is a total different story.
Yeah.
You have a lot of new great.
Shanghai is amazing. Singapore is amazing. Hong Kong has some incredible architecture.
Busan and Seoul, Korea have some great new stuff. In Europe, Europe is more difficult because it's older, right? It's already been built. But I would say
It
London,
already looked good. What did we have to do? No.
I would say London, Berlin, and actually Milano. Here in Italy. Milan has got some really fascinating things, including I was lucky enough to work on the City Life development, which is one of the biggest developments in Europe, and which my father won the competition in 2005, I think, but due to the recession and so on, it was a very long process. But Milan has really been transformed, and I think beautifully, by not just City Life. There's also other big developments, but it's a great city for architecture.
Well, Milan has certainly a badass architect there, so it makes sense.
On which our company worked. Lev worked alongside his father on the master plan there. Incorporates a lot of incredible architects like Zaha Hadid and Bjarke Ingels and Suzaki. Yep. So, yeah. There's
a lot of great architecture in Milan. Actually, I might put Milan as number one in Europe if somebody wants.
It's really a confluence of really brilliant minds that contributed to that project and that neighborhood that was really born out of nothing. It was an old fairgrounds that they was just sitting there. So,
yeah.
Now it's now it's probably the most expensive place in Milan to live. It's really transformed everything around it. Really amazing.
Wow. That's really great. This has been a ton of fun, guys. I hope you had a good time.
Absolutely. Great
thank
question.
you for taking the nighttime effort to talk with us.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Justin.
No problem. If people wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You come to our website, it's libeskind.it, or on any of our social media handles, which is at Libeskind Studio Design.
I'll make sure I'll throw all those in the show notes. And is there anything else you'd like to tell the people before we say our goodbyes?
You should demand more. Demand more from your architects and demand more from your developers. You guys deserve more. You deserve to live in something beautiful. Shouldn't just be over in Europe.
Yeah, and love your city.
Love your city.
Because it's
meet your neighbors. Go meet your neighbors. They're probably
nice. Say hello to your neighbors. That's right.
Love it.
This has been great, guys. Thank you so much, listeners. I hope you had just as fun of time as we did. And until next time, adios.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the three pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
Keep building scale.
Scale.